Okay, let's dive right in. We're tackling one of the wildest, most puzzling questions in all of science today. How do living things actually maintain their shape in a universe that is basically defined by chaos? Whether it's a flatworm regenerating a lost head or a human body healing a wound, nature has this incredible, uncanny ability to remember its form. But how? Today, we're exploring the hidden software that stitches our physical reality together. And specifically, we're going to compare two major theories, Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance versus Michael Levin's bioelectric networks, to see which one actually offers a concrete, mechanistic explanation for how biological form persists.
So here is our roadmap for this explainer. First up, the mystery of form. Then we'll unpack Sheldrake's habits of nature, move on to Levin's bioelectric software, compare those two frameworks directly, and finally wrap up with why this order matters to you. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The mystery of form. Before we even touch the lab science, let's start with this really beautiful, almost intuitive feeling that there is a deep, hidden order right underneath reality. To really grasp this tension between order and chaos, think about the artist G.C. Myers and his painting Between Order and Chaos. Up top, you have this wild, slashing, totally chaotic sky, but down below, highly structured, perfectly neat flower beds. And there's this one round flower bed that perfectly echoes the exact shape of the sun above it. It's literally form recognizing form across a massive scale. That kind of visual synchronicity beautifully captures Carl Jung's concept of Unus Mundus, which is Latin for one world. It's this profound idea that our inner minds and the outer physical world actually emerge from the exact same singular substrate. It tells us that behind all the crazy chaos of the universe, there is a unifying realm of absolute order tying it all together. Section 2, Sheldrake's habits of nature. So if nature does have this underlying order, how exactly does it remember what shapes to take? How do these patterns persist over time?
Well, biologist Rupert Sheldrake came up with a highly poetic answer for this called morphic resonance. He basically suggested that the laws of physics aren't rigid laws at all, but actually more like habits. In his framework, nature learns by doing, guided by invisible morphic fields that allows species to essentially tap into a shared, cumulative memory across space and time.
To back this up, Sheldrake often points to these classic rat maze experiments from the 1920s through the 50s. Get this. After rats at Harvard spent generations learning how to escape a specific water maze, making fewer and fewer errors, totally unrelated rats of the same breed all the way in Edinburgh and Melbourne just suddenly started solving it almost instantly. No physical connection whatsoever. Sheldrake argued, hey, they aren't relying on genetics here. They're tuning into a global, species-wide broadcast of how to solve this maze. It's a fascinating thought, right? But here is the catch. While morphic resonance is a really elegant way to explain these meaningful coincidences, it completely lacks physical evidence. Mainstream science widely rejects it precisely because it doesn't give us a tangible how. It relies on invisible, non-local fields that we just cannot measure or verify in a laboratory. Which brings us to Section 3, Levin's bioelectric software. Let's transition away from those speculative fields and look at some measurable mechanisms in actual, peer-reviewed developmental biology. Biologist Michael Levin out at Tufts University has discovered something absolutely incredible. He found that the body literally runs on bioelectric software. He proved that all cells, not just the ones in our brains, maintain voltage differences using ion channels. They use distributed electrical networks to communicate and, incredibly, to remember their target anatomy. It is actual, literal, cellular software running on the hardware of our bodies. And Levin's lab has shown this bioelectricity in action with some mind-blowing results. By simply tweaking these electrical signals, they successfully coaxed flatworms into growing 2 heads. They've even programmed living xenobots, which are made entirely from frog cells, to rapidly self-heal custom shapes in mere minutes. And they did all of this without altering a single drop of DNA. Essentially, these cells are acting as little problem-solving agents with their own basal cognition. But the most astonishing breakthrough has to be anthrobots. These are tiny, self-assembling living robots built from totally ordinary adult human lung cells. Because of this bioelectric intelligence, these lung cells, when taken out of their usual environment, actually coordinate to trigger rapid repair in damaged human neural tissue. Let's look at the exact experiment because it's wild. Scientists took a flat 2D sheet of human neurons
and literally scratched it with a metal rod to mimic a severe nerve wound. Then they dropped in clusters of these anthrobots, or superbots, right onto the wounded area. Within just 72 hours, they watched as the biobots actively coaxed the human neurons to grow nerve fibers and bridge the gap. And the success rate? 100%. Every single connected superbot replicate showed full gap closure. The cells didn't just sit around. They proved they hold a deep, shared memory of how to rebuild life, sending out localized signals to perfectly restore the structural pattern. Moving to Section 4, comparing the frameworks. Okay, let's get into the core showdown of this explainer. Which of these frameworks actually gives us a real, mechanistic explanation for how biological form persists in the face of chaos? On one side, we have Sheldrake's very intuitive habits of nature and morphic resonance. On the other, we have Levin's concrete, measurable cellular software driven by bioelectricity. Let's put them head to head. When we look at the comparison, the winner for a true mechanistic explanation is absolutely clear. Sheldrake's theory relies on metaphysical speculation, invisible non-local fields, and an abstract cumulative memory. It's a beautiful metaphor, sure, but it's unverifiable. Levin, on the other hand, gives us peer-reviewed lab science. His framework uses local ion channel signaling and bioelectric pattern memory, which actually leads to real-world actionability, meaning revolutionary medical applications for healing. So, Levin's bioelectricity is the tangible substrate we've been looking for. It is the actual hardware and software that takes Sheldrake's highly poetic idea of nature's memory and turns it into a physical, testable reality. We don't have to guess about invisible fields anymore because we can literally measure the voltage patterns cells use to maintain their shape.
Finally, Section 5, why this order matters. You might be wondering, what does the cellular software of an anthrobot have to do with you and me in our everyday lives?
Well, it matters deeply because reality is highly fractal. In systems design, there's a concept called RFC, or recursive fractal consistent. In plain English, it means the exact same structural patterns that organize our microscopic cells also repeat at the massive scale of our social communities and human systems.
And because of this fractal nature, we can use these recurring patterns to our advantage in relational systems design. Instead of trying to fight chaos with top-down control or forced arguments, we can practice what's called state modulation, but gently shifting the operating state or emotional regulation of a group, acting more like a thermostat than a thermometer. We foster a low authoritarian environment, and just like a self-healing anthrobot repairing a wound, you allow order and coherence to emerge naturally. Carl Jung really hit the nail on the head when he said, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." That profound quote perfectly captures the journey of this explainer. Beneath the slashing, chaotic sky of our world, there is a measurable, powerful, and deeply embedded bioelectric order just waiting to be engaged. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought to ponder today. When you are faced with chaos, whether it's in your own biology, a difficult relationship, or a complex project at work, how will you shift the underlying state to let your own flower beds thrive and that hidden order naturally emerge? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep looking for those patterns, and I'll catch you next time.